everyone. Thank you so much for coming this evening to this information session on the Master of Arts in Global Thought at Columbia University. I'm Sarah Miller-Davenport. I am the graduate program director here. And tonight we have an excellent roundtable of folks affiliated with the MA in Global Thought who will be here to chat with you about what the MA is like, why they chose this program, what they've been able to do with the degree after graduating, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. So I'm encouraging everyone to post questions in the Q&A as they come up for you, and we'll collect them over the course of the discussion. So first I want to introduce Vishakha Desai, who is the chair of the Committee on Global Thought. Dr. Desai is senior advisor for global affairs to the president of Columbia University and a senior research scholar for the School of International and Public Affairs at Columbia. She served as president and CEO of the Asia Society, a global organization dedicated to strengthening partnerships between Asia and the US from 2004 to 2012. And at that point, she joined Columbia. Our other panelist tonight is Telma Viale, who's Executive Search and Leadership Director of the SRI initiative. Telma combines an understanding of the public and private sector, knowledge in psychology and global thought, with over 25 years of experience supporting global leadership in international organizations. She has held advocacy roles as special representative to the UN of the ILO, top HR leadership positions in various UN organizations, and was a partner at Kennedy Fitch, where she designed unconscious bias training for HR leaders. Telma now leads executive search at SRI Executive, conducting key leadership searches in institutions that support the Sustainable Development Goals. Idil Uner is Associate Public Information Officer at the UN. Oh, and I should say Telma was a Global Thought alumna of 2021, and Idil is a Global Thought alumna of 2020. And Idil is currently an officer at the UN Office of the Secretary General's Envoy in the Partnerships and Strategic Communications team. Previously, she worked within the Sustainable Development Goals integration team at the UN Development Program as a communications consultant. Prior to UNDP, while completing her master's degree, Idil interned at UN Peacekeeping and UNICEF USA. So that's who we have on board for tonight, and I want to get straight to our questions. So I'll open up with a very broad one, which is what makes CGT unique? So let me throw it out to Vishakha first. What makes CGT unique?
Well, I must say that actually I would love to hear from Telma and from Idil to see what they think is unique. But at least from my perspective, having been in the world of arts and culture in a global arena for a very, very long time, what makes Global Thought program unique is that it's very much about critical thinking about the world and your relationship to the world. In other words, it is not so much about global studies that says, okay, I'm going to learn 3 things from China, 2 things from India, 1 from Europe, and then it's global. I think that is one of the ways that people define global. Whereas the way we think about global thought is that no matter where you are, you need to think about the world and its relationship to you, because that is the kind of world you live in. And the program is designed for that critical thinking, multidisciplinary, transnational, and interdisciplinary, so that the approach to global ideas is right from the get-go, not privileging any one country, one discipline, but multiple disciplines and transnational ideas. And it's designed that way so that people get right to it. That's what I think would be unique about the program.
Telma, why don't you tell us what you think makes CGT unique?
I think it is the way in which you dive into the issues that have become global, but most importantly, the way in which these issues connect across sectors, I would say, and also obviously across regions, countries, etc. When I was at the UN before making the decision of taking this master's program, I remember I was part of the Secretary General's team that was discussing the post-2015 agenda that became the 2030 agenda. And jokingly, people would say that it was like a Christmas tree exercise where everyone would come and just say, you know, the most important issue is health, the most important issue is migration, the most important issue is education, labor, etc. And that at the end of the day, what I did realize that was the most important issue was the interconnectedness. And so I think that global thought gives the depth of these issues and the interconnectedness. And as the SDGs evolve, nothing will happen if we don't understand the interconnectedness of goals, for example, and of these issues. And this program, in my opinion, was very unique in providing that these two elements.
Yeah, and I can certainly speak to that because I'm designing the MA seminar for the spring with a colleague right now, and you know, first of all, it changes every year because we're responding to what's going on globally. And we're also very conscious of designing it in a way that emphasizes those interconnections rather than doing sort of separate units on, say, you know, in sort of an area studies approach, right? Or, you know, but it's very much about thinking about climate change in relation to public health, right? I mean, you know, it's in this way that really emphasizes those interconnections.
Silos, right? Which is the big issue that we have in academia as well, or in institutions, you know, that things have been siloed. Yeah.
Exactly. Idil, what do you think makes CGT unique?
I'm glad Telma mentioned silos because that's exactly what I was going to talk about. It's sort of breaking down these silos and having to always work across trade-offs is to really question the boundaries that exist and pushing those boundaries as well. So there's that element that I think Telma and Vishakha both touched on, but I think perhaps more importantly, it's who you get to be in the program with, not just your professors and those teaching you, but also your peers. I think because it's such a multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary program, it attracts people from all walks of life, and that is how you push those boundaries and question those boundaries. It's with those types of people from different disciplines as well. So it's not just what you learn, but how you learn it and with whom. That I think makes CGT so unique.
I mean, I think, Idil, you bring something out that I wish I had said before, and that is, it's not just different backgrounds people have, but even different cultural backgrounds. So that when I say to people that this year we have 39 students from 25 different nationalities, and many of them with binational or triple nationalities, it is very, very unique. And it's unique no matter where you are, because it's both disciplinary difference and it's cultural difference. So people actually have to learn from each other and with each other. And oftentimes when alums come together, and Telma, you will know that too, is that people always said the best part was also just who my cohorts were. And that's a unique feature of this program, much more so than many, many other programs.
Yeah, you have that like-mindedness,
right,
in the group, which at least in our cohort, which I mean, it was the pandemic, so it was a very unique, you know, we stick together, but we also shared very, very similar concerns.
right.
And to have that like-minded group in a university setting, in a master's, it's not always a given.
Right.
I would also add there is this like-minded element, but there's in the sense that there is this openness from everyone, it seems, to explore different avenues. But I think there's also, on the flip side, sort of a willingness to challenge each other too, and to challenge our own assumptions about where we're coming from and what we bring to the table as well. So I think that that's also something that's quite unique about the program.
Yeah, it's what I would say, it's a safe place where arguments can occur. a safe place for unsafe ideas, if you will, and that space exists within the program.
Global
that's
thought
a
requires
lovely,
thinking. Sorry.
oh, go ahead. I was just going to say that's a lovely way of putting it. And I've seen, we have a brand new cohort this year, and already, I think just from the very first day from our orientation session, it was just very clear that, this was, they were bonding and clicking, and most people are not from New York, right? And many people have never even been to New York. This is their first time. And I think, it's really exciting to get to be able to do this kind of program in New York City together as a group.
Yep.
But Telma, I interrupted. You were going to say something.
Go ahead, Telma.
No, I was going to say that global thought requires hard thinking. And that's where, to what Vishakha was saying, you do need to think hard. And when you think hard, you'll think crazy too, right? But okay, this is possible, this is not possible. And I think in terms of intellectual stimulation, and also recognizing the concern in other students, that it is such a passionate concern for the same issues that you are struggling with. It is almost, I would say, it's a bit of a healing from the tragic situation in which we find ourselves in the world, because there's just so many unresolved global issues.
And if I may add, I think there's a lot of learning and unlearning that takes place, questioning our own assumptions about the world and how we view it. And I think that's also only made possible through this the open nature also of the program and the structure itself. So the fact that you can take classes from all these different schools at Columbia, which is very unique as a master's program as well. So that's another added, at least when I was looking and applying for the program, an added bonus.
So why don't we segue to that question, because we have an audience here of prospective students. So Idil and Telma, tell us how you ended up choosing this particular program. What drew you to CGT specifically? So let's start with Telma.
As I mentioned before, I had worked before for the UN for a few decades, so I was familiar with the global institutions and the different mandates. But where I could find a program where I could develop a few centimeters of depth on those issues, it is very rare. I mean, if I would go to SIPA, like Vishakha said, probably I would learn, and I did go for certain countries of interest, right? Learned about Brazil, etc. But here, this program gave me that opportunity to have my entire agenda of interest and dive deep to some centimeters of depth. Obviously, I'm not going to be a specialist on all these issues, but to be able to understand the issues, to know the questions, the unresolved questions, and to develop my analytical skills to express those issues. And the program did that. So when I saw the program, I said, this is sort of ideal. And I did not apply to any other program, but I said, if I'm not accepted in this program, I am not going anywhere. So it's this one or nothing. And it was not a disappointment. I must say, I was prepared to work hard, and we worked very hard. We put ourselves to the test, but we get reskilled in critical thinking and in writing. And in writing 600 words, which is, I think, one of the hardest things to do, and yet one of the most important things nowadays, especially with this flood of information that we have. If you can't say it in 500 words, you lose your audience.
Idil, what about you? What drew you to CGT specifically?
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting that we have Telma and myself here, because we almost opposite ends. Telma has vast experience, and I came into CGT right after undergrad. So I think that's just a testament to how it draws just a range of students. But for me, I was looking to sort of pivot to international affairs. And I was quite intentional about this too, similar to Telma in terms of the program. So I studied psychology, economics, and marketing in my undergrad, and they were at least like an econ or traditional academic sort of subjects. But I saw so many interdisciplinary angles in both. I mean, they're both very interrelated, but I wanted to get more into development, human rights, peace and security, all of that. And so I felt like this program was a really good entryway into that. And so for me, it was an opportunity to also do that and be based in New York, where a lot of international forums take place and are, such as the UN, where I'm working now. So it was really like twofold in that sense, or manyfold, the advantages of being at CGT and at Columbia and in New York. And then I would also just add, for me, it was also very important that I left with more questions than answers, and I think I got that. And also what Telma mentioned about the writing skills was critical, because I could have also gone to SIPA, but for me, and that, you know, there's a whole policy making, especially there, that's something that's really focused on, and a lot of it does draw a lot of UN people, but for me, I think especially the way the world is sort of evolving and how we're seeing all these like integrated and multifaceted crises, it's about being able to sort of look at it in a multidimensional way and talk about it and write about it in that way. And now I work in communications, and so the MA honestly really helped hone my writing skills as well. And I think in hindsight, it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Both you and Telma mentioned, you know, this idea that it's not so much about coming away with this very specific, you know, set of knowledge, right? But it's about coming away with knowing what questions to ask, right? Because there are just going to be so many more questions to ask about the world, right? And having those kinds of skills that allow you to formulate those kinds of questions.
And how to approach those questions.
Approach the questions, exactly. Yeah. I think that what that says is that to recognize that global is changing. The world is changing. So whatever you know about the world today is going to be absolutely obsolete in 3 years. So the only way you can actually go forward is at least know what questions to ask and how to go about finding the answers, rather than going in with the content. I mean, it's sort of like opposite of accounting, you know, where you learn the principles of accounting and you think you can work on that. But even accounting is changing. And then the next time you go around, it's actually going to be a different field. So one of the things that the program does is to really train you for questions to ask and ways to tackle them. And I was very surprised when we met our alums last year in May, is when I asked them, and I said, you know, and some of you remember that I would ask, I said, how does it help you in your professional career? And many of you said, you know, it's not just about the professional career, it's really about life. It's about how we are thinking of ourselves vis-a-vis the world. And I, for one, was very pleased. Of course, I want all of you to get good jobs, but it's also about the kind of person you become because of the capaciousness of thinking and asking questions.
While we're on the topic of questions, just a reminder that if any of you in the audience have questions, please start putting them in the Q&A now, because we'll transition to questions from the audience in about 10 minutes. But Vishakha, you mentioned talking to alumni and you know how they had transitioned from CGT to their post-CGT careers. So I wanted to ask Telma and Idil how CGT has helped them in their careers, whether that's about the kinds of skills that CGT helped you develop that you apply in your job, you know, or in some cases maybe sort of the nitty-gritty of how CGT actually helped you to attain some of those jobs or internships or professional experience. So Idil, why don't you go first? Idil is speaking from the actual UN right now. I just
not on purpose, but I did try to go home, but I couldn't quite make it. Yeah, sure. So for me, I mean, I think I touched on this in the previous question a bit, but just to maybe dive a bit deeper. So while, to sort of answer the latter part of your question first as well, while at CGT, I made a very intentional effort to also capitalize on my time in New York, to intern and to gather those experiences. Also because I was coming right after undergrad, so I understood that sort of to have somewhat of an edge, I needed to you know, be exposed to the work that I was interested in, and also to see if that's actually something I want to do. And it was really helpful to do that with classes as well, because they really sort of fed into each other and informed the way I shaped the program, because that's also another benefit of CGT, is you really get to sort of direct it in the way that you want to, but it's also good to sort of do it in a somewhat of a specific way. So you leave with an expertise or a specialization. So for me, that was forced displacement and migration within global governance. But I'm getting ahead of myself to sort of backtrack. I interned both at UNICEF and at UN Peacekeeping while at CGT. And to be honest, I think just you know, being at Columbia really helped when I was applying and interviewing, because it allowed me to sort of like speak. I had that background and the understanding when I didn't previously as much. So that was definitely helpful. And it was also good to sort of like know you know, you sort of connect the dots better when you sort of have an overview through Columbia as well. When professors are talking about something or explaining something, oh, okay, now I understand how they're all related and how the system works as well. So that was beneficial. And then I think you were also asking now in terms of what I do and how it's helpful. I mean, sure, writing is like a very clear example of that. I mean, I work in communications, and a large portion of that is writing, but it's not just writing and not just academic writing, but it's writing for different audiences and through different mediums, across different channels. So you really have to sort of tailor it, and you really have to think of the big picture and the strategy. And also, I think what CGT also really helped with is sort of, I work for a very bureaucratic organization, but also an organization who is willing to sort of adapt with the times. And sort of, I work in a very creative job as well. So it's like balancing that. I think CGT really helped to understand sort of where the world is going, and how to help push for that internally here at the UN too. Hopefully that helps give somewhat of an answer.
Great, thank you, Idil. Telma.
Yes, as I was saying, I was already working in my past life. So I graduated previously from Teachers College, and I'm an organizational psychologist. But that field took me to leadership positions at the various UN institutions. So I was HR director of several UN institutions. My last job was in a more sort of representational role. And I think that there, if you're a good HR person, you should know the business. So I knew the content with some depth so that I could represent, right? And call in the experts. But I think that exercise of the post-2015 agenda, you know, just filled me with humbleness about how little we know, how much more I needed to know about content. And although I had already left the UN and I had joined this firm that does leadership search for UN institutions and for NGOs, and my job is to assess leaders that aspire to these roles, having that deeper understanding of the issues, whether, as I said, whether it was health, migration, hunger, etc., right, or macroeconomics, it was going to give me a very different level of conversation with these very, very high level individuals. We're talking former ministers, sometimes former prime ministers, sometimes, VPs, CEOs, etc. And the confidence in my preparation within the program and my preparation whenever I have to prepare for conversation, these really just, mirror together, right? So issues of global governance, for example, which is it's a structured course that we receive, but really understanding how the World Bank was created, what was behind those philosophies. I mean, it's almost as if you have been walking through a road, through a journey, without really understanding what's behind the flowers. So it was just so much more clarity on everything. And it's just that pair of glasses. So I think I stayed at my job because I love my job, but it has certainly enhanced it in a very unique manner, not just because of the studies, but because of, I would say, the tools that I developed to research a bit further on any subject, which of course touches the entire, agenda of the 2030 agenda.
Yeah, thank you, Telma. That's a terrific way of putting it. I always, I'm a historian, so I'm a bit biased, but I think one of the advantages to studying history, for example, is to be able to see, to be able to sort of to learn on a kind of fundamental level that the world wasn't always this way. Things weren't always this way. Here's how they got this way, right? And to really upend our understanding of the world as it is right now, right? To question the way it is right now, right? Which opens the possibilities for pursuing some kind of change, right? Which I think many of our students are committed to on one level or another. Vishakha, did you have anything to add to that about what our students do afterwards?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think that we do know that one of the things the students have said to us is the ability to synthesize, ability to look at the interconnectedness, things that Telma has talked about, that actually seems to be different from other people who are working in similar arena. So the students seem to feel that that's a skill set they developed that was very useful to them. And it's not by surprise that many of them are in strategic communication, like as Idil said, but also people who are going in many different fields, even in multinationals. I think it's amazing to me that 64% of our alums have gone in private sector. People often assume that global affairs, global thought, it's going to be mainly UN, or it's going to be mainly this or that. We actually have people going to private sector, going for PhD, a small and professional degrees, and some people who are then going into NGOs and the UN and the international arena. So it is interesting that it isn't one track, depending on what students come with their interest. And I think that I can't emphasize enough that one of the things I think is pretty special about students who come to CGT is that they're both open, committed to global issues, but also aware that they don't know all the answers, and it's okay. And I think that, so they're not just coming in to say, okay, I need this skill to get that job. They are more open than that, intellectually and otherwise. And therefore, the arena that they go into also seem to be much broader than what you would expect.
Yeah, our students and our program are not instrumentalists in their thinking, and in their career goals. Okay, so I want to make sure we have time for questions, because we do have a number of questions, which is excellent. So one question we had, and I'll throw this out to Idil and Telma, is what was your MA research focused on? So maybe both of you could tell us what you wrote your final capstone essays about. Telma.
Yeah, so one of the great things is precisely that any subject that you've been always saying, oh, I wish I could know more about this and I could explore that, this program gives you the opportunity to just go there. with the amazing resources that Colombia has. So in a very provocative manner, I mean, I come from Latin America, I'm a mixture of European, but also indigenous blood, even though it's a very small percentage, but nonetheless, I'm from Central America. I've always had a curiosity about the views of indigenous peoples on development, on the development paradigm. And it's a huge issue. And I actually have an issue with the word development. And when you study it, you understand that development is a Eurocentric concept, right? And so my thesis was about the perspectives of indigenous peoples on development, but I chose to concentrate on the Brazilian indigenous, which is one of the largest populations in the continent, in the Amazons. And because it's very difficult to communicate with them and have access to them, I chose the leaders that have been vocal. One that has been, his life has been translated by an anthropologist, which is David Kopinawa, who's a very known indigenous leader. Elton Krenak, who's also very known, and he speaks Portuguese, so he was able to, to articulate the views. And then I also looked at art, and this is thanks also to the courses that we had, art in protest and protest in art. So to also understand all the voices in society that are going to say what they think. So that was the subject, and I would say I don't have all the answers, but I certainly have the questions.
A very interdisciplinary essay, indicative of the CGT approach in general.
Yeah.
Idil, what about your MA essay? What was your MA essay about?
So mine was about, and it took me some time to come to this, which is also nice. There was some back and forth, and it's an accelerated program, but there's still some space to explore and fine tune your topic. But mine was on the implications of the temporary protection status for displaced Syrians in Turkey. So looking really at the legal implications, but then also sort of the provisions through education, employment that were available or are not, or were not for Syrians living in Turkey post conflict. But I'd also like to add that sort of the beauty of this is also that with your other finals for other classes too, you can sort of steer it in a way where it's aligned with sort of a general umbrella specialized topic, if you will, of your choosing. So again, like I said, mine was on forced displacement and migration. So for example, I took classes on human rights and global economic justice, where I talked about urban refugees, or not talked about, where I wrote about and discussed in class, I guess, urban refugees and etc. And then I had a class, for example, on climate refugees, where I talked about, or wrote about, discussed refugee encampment in global discussions. We did a group project on a discourse analysis of the UPR, so the Universal Periodic Review reports as well. So it's really sort of being able to, like I said, shape the program, also not just your MA essay, but others as well in the different schools.
Yes, it's very customizable. And, I think our students take different approaches to that. I think some students really choose their electives on the, as a way to shape their final essay, right? Or as a way to, in some way, support their essay. And, I think other students, especially those coming from, who are not coming from the United States or North America, this is in many ways their first experience of a liberal arts education, right? I used to teach in the UK. So, it's really, I think, quite, it's a new experience for people to be able to take sort of whatever class they want, right? And to have that level of choice, right? So you can take courses that are not directly related to your MA essay, right? And that aren't necessarily, don't have global in the title, right? You really have a lot of choice. So I'm just going to start going through some of these other questions. And just to let you all know, we will be sending a follow-up email after this information session to everyone who registered, with an opportunity to continue to be in touch with us. So if you have further questions, you will have an opportunity to ask them. But one person who's from Europe asked about the GRE being optional for the application, but is it recommended? And we'll just say it's really up to you, because we do have so many international students, so we're not as focused on, you know, a kind of American exam metrics as some other MA programs might be. Another student asked, can CGT students intern at the UN during their studies throughout the semester? Is it difficult for international students to receive such opportunities for internships during and after graduate studies? In terms of employment, international students can work on campus, but they cannot be paid for jobs off campus, although they can do unpaid internships. But there is support for the OPT, which is the, oh gosh, I'm going to forget it. It's the optional
Professional.
I don't remember what the
Training.
the optional practical training. Yeah, optional practical training, and that will allow you to essentially extend your visa for further training if you want to stay in the U.S. You know, and apply for jobs in the U.S. Another person asked, how important is it to have an idea of the specifics of what you wish to study in depth before applying? Yeah, I mean, Idil shaking her head. You will almost definitely change your area of focus once you get here. You might stay within your general topic, or you're going to obviously come with certain interests. But I think it would actually be a shame in a way to come here, take classes, you know, and not have that influence your final essay, and you know, to not have that influence your final the curriculum that you shape, that you end up the classes that you end up taking.
That we've had both kinds of students. There are students who came in with an idea, and then they focused, they narrowed down, they shaped it, but they stayed with the idea that they had. Then there are students who went completely the other way. So one example is a student who now is in the Dutch Foreign Service, and he is of Ugandan Dutch origin with some Indian blood somewhere. And he was very clear he was going to do something in IR, completely different. He actually ended up writing his master's essay on identity. And he worked with colleagues in anthropology, history, and other places. And he feels that it was one of the best things he did, because it's a kind of thing that he would have never done were it not for this kind of a program. So it does have both, but I will say that it's a 9-month program. It is very short, it is intense, and if you don't have a good sense of what you're going to do by the first part of the fall, it would be tough. Yeah. So my advice to everybody would be, think about what you want to do, and we will work with you early on so that you begin to hone it and develop it, because there isn't a lot of luxury of time.
But I want to take this opportunity to point out that we offer really a very supportive environment at CGT, which I do think is unique in many ways, in terms of, again, yes, it's a short program, so by early fall, we do expect students to have a good idea of what they're going to be writing their MA essay on, but we will help you through that process. We talk about your essays every single week in MA Seminar. We have a very well-designed series of milestones that we ask you to meet, a sort of iterative process of building upon, you know, going from a general topic to a specific research question, to a proposal, to an outline, and you have a lot of support throughout. And you're assigned an advisor early on, who will meet with you regularly to help you develop your essay. We also will make sure that you are in touch with other Columbia faculty who have expertise, because again, it's an interdisciplinary program. So, there's a wide variety of expertise to draw on while you're at Columbia. So we really do guide you through that process. But yes, a lot of our, throughout, at the beginning of that process, I think, and, even just within the first couple of weeks of being here, I think a lot of students, their minds open up and they might change the topic that they thought they were going to write on when they applied. We don't have a ton of time left, so I'm going to leave this one more question, which was, how does the interdisciplinary approach that CGT takes play out in students' everyday classroom experience? I'll just answer quickly. We have an MA core that all students take. One core class, you have a choice of which course to take. So one would be on culture and identity, and one would be on art and protest. But otherwise, everyone takes the same courses for the MA core, but about half of your curriculum will be devoted to the core and the other half will be elective. But I'll leave it to Telma and Idil to give our attendees a sense of how that plays out in the classroom on a kind of day-to-day basis, doing this kind of interdisciplinary program. So Telma, why don't you go first?
Well, I think that the fact that we do share those core courses, I think that that's what kind of glued us together. And they're kind of a skeleton, right, to understand many of the other things. But we also found that many of us also took the same courses as electives because we had sort of similar areas. And
right.
But I would say that those core courses that we shared were the backbone of our teamwork, of getting to know each other, of learning from each other. I think that, as Idil was saying, learning from the other students is a very, very important aspect of this program because they have amazing minds, because they have passion, they're brilliant, and they surprise us, and in this exchange surprises that create something. So those blogs that were created, that's, I think, probably the richest part of the program.
I think.
What about you? How did you experience interdisciplinarity, and what was your sort of daily experience of taking classes at CGT and at Columbia?
Yeah, so I think to add to what Telma is saying, what's to me what I found really helpful was that while some of us did take similar elective courses as well, we also took different ones, obviously, as well. And then you come into these core classes with a bunch of students who have, I don't know, maybe someone's taken something on energy and enterprise development, etc. Someone on young people and humanitarian aid, or something in the journalism school. And then you come and you bring different academic perspectives as well to those core classes. What I would also add that was really, that I found really helpful and refreshing was that we had a lot of speakers also come into these core seminar classes. So for example, we had special rapporteurs come in, but people also from different fields, not just international affairs, to speak not just about their jobs, but more about their fields. And that also sort of helped broaden our perspectives. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Vishakha, do you want to add to the interdisciplinary experience in the classroom?
It's fair to say that in the MA core seminar, we work very hard to actually bring different disciplinary perspectives on similar issues. so that people understand that there is a disciplinary approach, but that is one approach, maybe not just the approach. And that actually helps open up the issues. But the other thing is because the students are trained in different disciplines in their undergraduate work, they also are asking the question from their disciplinary perspective, and others are asking something else. So they realize that actually there is a disciplinary perspective, there is a cultural perspective, and all of these pieces have to come together, and that you can hear that from each other. And that goes back to having that safe place where people could say, wait a minute, why are you saying that? Without attacking somebody, because you already have developed a very core, strong relationship. And so interdisciplinarity comes in multiple ways. It's sequential, it's side by side, and it's truly interdisciplinary when you're talking to each other.
Mhm. Well, I'm going to leave it there because we are at 7:03. I think this has certainly given our attendees a flavor of what CGT is like. Many of your questions, or some of your questions, were answered in the chat. We've also directed you to some of the CGT websites that will help answer your questions. And again, we will follow up after this with an email to you all with the opportunity to ask more questions or to have a one-on-one session with me to talk more about the program. I'll just also remind everyone that the early deadline for applications is Wednesday, February 1st, and the final deadline is Thursday, March 16th. So thank you all for coming. Thank you so much to our panelists, and we hope you apply.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Great to see you guys too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.